Member Diamond?
Yes.
Member Almond?
Here.
Member Riley? Here. Member Myrtle?
Here.
Member Vistana? Here. Member Weir?
Here.
Member Liberty?
Here.
Member Angelo?
Here.
Member McGorty? And Member Miller?
Here.
And the record will also reflect the county council is in attendance.
Would any of the members of the audience like to make a public comment?
Oh,
Public comment.
Yeah, public comment.
oh, public comment, I'm sorry, I'm not quite ready yet. I do have, some photographs I wanted to show.
Could you please stand up at the podium?
At the podium, right.
Identify yourself.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Well, I'm really not together. I still want to speak for the coach, John Wetzler, Chair Emeritus from the Behavioral Health Board, and representing the 5th District as much as I can. There you are. And just wanted to let everybody know that I think that we have to honor the votes that Measure B got to pass Measure B that came from the coast. I wanted to know how this group will honor the people who did vote for Measure B and what people from on the coast can expect from this group. That's the gist of what I've got. I have what I want to speak about. I have some photographs here of work that's done on the crisis stabilization unit from Nevada County. I've been in contact with them recently, and I have some nice photographs of their facility that they put in for $550,000. It's literally a 4-room crisis stabilization unit attached to, no, not attached, just off the side of their facility, the hospital facility in Grass Valley. So I have these photographs I wanted to show you. That, of course, did not include the foundation to build this thing and the, let's see, what else that included was, water, sewer, and electric. So all those had to be kept. If anybody's interested, I
Yeah,
have.
they come to me, please. Thank you.
To you.
Somebody open the door in the back, please.
Is it locked?
Not this here?
Is the
Whatever you want to send to the committee, I'll take. Thank you.
I'll just one set.
Whatever you'd like.
I don't have any keys, but the door's locked. Okay, we'll just leave it propped open. If the phone starts ringing in the back, is that your bag?
Was that me again?
I moved it out.
Good, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
It's out there, all
Right
right?
there, right there.
Okay, I better get that and excuse myself, and I think that's it for right now. There will be times for public speaking later. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'm sorry I wasn't together right
For
now.
items that are on the agenda.
Pardon?
For items that are on the
Yeah.
agenda?
Exactly.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. West.
Okay, thank you.
So, moving on to item 3A, would the county auditor please give a report on funds collected so far?
Yes, Boyd Weir, County Auditor. This is in your packet, a life-to-date financial schedule for all of our Measure B funds from the beginning of time. This is kept in a restricted fund, 1224. It has its own budget in it. You can see on the top portion of my spreadsheet the revenues that we have received to date. We have now received 11 months of tax proceeds from Measure B. Total now at the end of 11 months is $7,484,140. As you know, we've been estimating that annually at about $7.5 million. So with one more good month in March, the March month, which will be coming at the end of this May here, we should expect to be maybe around the $8 million mark. So that was pretty good performance for 12 months. And the drop down to the expenses, they have not changed since our last meeting. They're still the same. And then the summary at the bottom shows the life-to-date revenues, the expenses to date. We have interest earnings now of $36,414. So our balance today is $7,321,506. And that's my report.
Thank you very much. Any comments from the committee on Mr. Weir's report? Any public comment on Mr. Weir's report? There being none, 3B, can I have a motion to approve the minutes of March 27th?
I have a correction.
Yes.
I was not present for the March 27th meeting, which does show me as being absent, but it also shows me as being present.
Covering all bases.
I do feel like that sometimes. Never seen it documented on paper, though.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the minutes as corrected.
Second?
All in favor? All
Was
any
that Robert
opposed?
Diamond with us?
Yes, I was making second.
Any opposed? That being said, we'll approve the minutes. Next is item, is there any public comment at this point? We will move on to item 3C, discussion possible action regarding status report. And for the sake of completeness, we prepared a PowerPoint that will be presented by Janelle.
Hi there, Janelle Robb, Deputy CEO. I'm here to just give a general overview of the committee's activities to date. And this will give you an idea of where the committee has spent their time largely. I mean, I know that there's been a lot of public inquiry as to, what have we done? What's been happening? And so this was put together to just kind of give a brief overview. And then you as committee members can use this as a tool basically to kind of inform anyone who has interest. And it cites some dates critical to where has led you to today. So if you go to the first slide, and I think each of you should have this in your packet. In January, so this gives you kind of an overview between January and March of 2018. The Board of Supervisors enacted the Mental Health Treatment Act Citizens Oversight Committee and appointed members. Those members were actually appointed to the committee on January 9th, 2018. The Mental Health Treatment Act Citizens Oversight Committee elected its officers. The committee members set a calendar. You created a mission statement. You received presentations on an overview of the mental health system, and you also received Brown Act training regarding basically all things that are about public meeting law and what we do as far as the Brown Act is concerned. On your next slide, which is April through June of 2018, you adopted rules of procedure, which Donna Spaghetti, gotta say Spaghetti, was the drafter of those rules. You also had recommended hiring a Kemper Consulting Group, which I believe was brought forward by the sheriff. That was as far as the assessment of the Kemper Consulting Group. And then you had Measure B, which went into effect on April the 1st of 2018. The first Measure B tax proceeds were received on June 26th of 2018. You received monthly reports, obviously, on the activities as far as the fiscal tax to date at each meeting as well. July through September of 2018, you received several presentations. One was on the psychiatric health facility, funding streams, Orchard Street, and then the Kemper Consulting Report was received. October through December, you had the following presentations: Howard Hospital, you had RCS here, Adventist Health Systems, I believe was also here. You had a MOPS presentation, and I know the name has changed, I heard everybody talking about it, but at the time it was MOPS. And then you requested approval from the Board of Supervisors for County Council to provide legal services to your oversight committee. The board did approve that request in January of 2019. County Council has been providing legal services from that point forward and has given you several updates, one of them regarding the Public Contract Code, and then one of them regarding the charge of the Oversight Committee and what your actual purposes are. So January through March, you had new officers that were elected. You received a legal update from County Council regarding the Public Contract Code. Sally Riley was brought on board as far as providing public contract construction consulting services. You made recommendations regarding the RFP and the feasibility study to the Board of Supervisors. You requested the adoption of a resolution from the board and provide the classification of the administrative project manager for Measure B as well. The board did adopt that resolution on March 12th of 2019. So there's a lot of words on this, so I'll just give a general overview of these. January 2019, the Kemper report was accepted as guidelines for the Mental Health Citizens Oversight Committee to make recommendations to the board regarding program priority, program and program funding. You made recommendations to the board to explore utilizing Measure B funds for the development of the crisis stabilization, crisis residential, and psychiatric health facility. You requested that the board direct staff to research options associated with the facility, including design bid build and potential property or facility locations. In February 2019, you directed to obtain a project manager to assist with the Oversight Committee and their goals. An advisory team volunteered to work with county staff on Mental Health Treatment Act Citizens Oversight Committee issues. And then in March of 2019, you formed an ad hoc, and it describes who those members are, which were Jan McGordy and Jeff Diamond, Janine Miller, and Donna Spaghetti, to review the Kemper report recommendations. I believe at this point, Jan's gonna give a little bit of an update on that, or did you wanna wait and do that later?
Sure, later. No, sure. So, we met, our little committee, Jen decided to, forego, and we went through the things in the Kemper report that had nothing to do with services, and focused upon financials. And there were 3 things that we narrowed down on that would be really good for the county to adopt at this time, which hopefully will be on Measure B committee's agenda next time we meet for approval. And those would be to maintain approved reserve, to have separate accounting system of expenditures and revenues, which we is already happening, and a 10-year strategic plan, a 10-year strategic financial plan, which are all things that were just spelled out in the Kemper report. But we think it's really important to put these things forward and in writing to have them go forward.
To clarify real quick, the members, the advisory team that were appointed to assist county staff were member Mark Myrtle and member Ross Liberty. So they've been working with county staff, we've been going on, and we really appreciate that. If you go to the page that has board direction, in January of 2019, the board authorized council to provide legal services. February, you have an update regarding the recommendations from the Mental Health Citizens Oversight Committee and directed staff to proceed with the entire process regarding the facility location and directed staff to move forward with that process. In March, the board adopted a resolution authorizing the adoption of the classification for the project manager. If you go on to the next slide, under current activities, so county staff right now are in the process of drafting what we're calling an RFP and an RFQ. And it's qualification-based selection, but we're also asking for a proposal. So it's a dual purpose solicitation. And this is regarding the feasibility study and the architectural services for the CSU, the CRT, and PUF unit. Human resources, and you'll have more information. You actually have an agenda item on that topic, and at the end here, I'm happy to also answer any questions. But Human Resources has posted the recruitment for the classification of the administrative project manager. That was done on March 25th. And we'll continue with the interviewing and hiring process based on the list. We do have Heidi Dunham here from HR. She's our HR director, and she's going to give you a brief update on that as well.
Good afternoon, Heidi Dunham, Human Resources Director for the county. On March 25th, we posted the position of Administrative Project Manager for Measure B. The project manager position closed on our website on April 9th. We received 24 applications for that position. We are finishing up our review of those applications. Unfortunately, this isn't the only recruitment that we're doing, so we have a lot of applications that we have to review, especially since we switched over to our computerized online program. We have so many applications, it just takes a little bit of time. We anticipate that the interviews will take place sometime in the next couple of weeks, actually. I hope to begin scheduling late next week for those interviews. The process for the interview will be a two-part process. We'll have a panel interview. The initial interview team will be made up of mental health treatment citizens, oversight committee members, and county staff. And then the finalists from that interview will go to the final interview, and that will be done by the sheriff and the CEO of the county, and they will also be making the final selection for that position. So that's the date for that position. Questions?
Do you have a question?
Did you say who from this committee would be on the initial review?
No, I did not say who would be on that yet.
To be decided, or?
That's to be decided.
Okay.
And that would probably be decided by this committee. It would not be my decision. Okay?
Didn't know if there were any questions on the presentation, broad overview?
Yeah, I had a question on, the sheet said January to March 2019. The third item, hired Sarah Sally Riley for public contract construction consultation services. I wasn't sure, or I didn't recall exactly what that position is and how that interfaces with the project manager.
Got you. So Sally Riley was brought on. I believe, I'm not sure if this board has been given there's an overview of the different teams that are associated with assisting Measure B at this moment in time. Sally's brought on, she's a public contract code consultant that's specifically, her expertise is in the public contract process, construction process. She's advising as far as the development of the RFQ and RFP. And as we award the contract to an architect, she will also be she's somewhat of an oversight. She used to work on, it's called CPAC. It was an oversight committee that kind of governed how government does their business.
Was she the one that was on
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. She's actually on the phone now, but she's just.
Okay, I was just trying to put her in context. Okay, thanks.
Are there any more questions from the board? And if not, is there any public comment? All right, next up. Oh, yes, Tammy, sorry. Please,
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Tammy Moss Chandler. I'm the Director of Health and Human Services for the county. And ACE has asked me to come up in his written item in the agenda. It ends with a bullet that just says Orchard Street. And I think that's what it says. And so I wanted to provide you an update on the Orchard Street property on behalf of the chair. So I know this committee has heard a lot from Redwood Community Services over the last year. A lot of property on Orchard Street and plans for a crisis residential treatment center and CSU, or crisis stabilization unit. So just to remind this committee that property is based and linked with a grant that County Behavioral Health and Recovery Services applied for several years ago through what's known as the California Health Facilities Financing Authority Investment in Mental Health Wellness Grant Program. We have a longer state name. And that funding opportunity released actually 5 or more years ago. And the county worked on an application that was specifically around crisis residential treatment needs in this county at that time, which we know is still a need today. The county applied for a very large grant that only received a $500,000 allocation, and that's the state financing authority. So in 2017, the county went into an agreement with Redwood Community Services in their desire and commitment to find some additional funding to leverage with that $500,000 so that a crisis residential treatment facility could be built in Mendocino County and leverage that grant, which we all know $500,000 alone wouldn't have been enough to accomplish some very rigorous requirements from that grant funding source. So the county went into a 1-year agreement with Redwood Community Services, and the initial aspect of that 1-year agreement was to purchase property on Orchard Street, where Redwood Community Services actually purchased 3 parcels as part of that purchase. One is a very large building that they operate out of today. It provides really important crisis services in Ukiah area. Also staffs additional administrative and program staff for Redwood Community Services. And there's a vacant lot in front of that building on Orchard Street. So Redwood Community Services actually took, what was part of that agreement with the county, they took several steps over that last year to try to identify additional funding. The most significant, I believe your committee's heard about, is they did a lot of initial development work in order to apply for what's called CDBG grant funding. It's about a year ago in the spring of 2018. So that money is through the Community Development Block Grant Program. It would have been a substantial multi-million-dollar investment to leverage against that initial $500,000 grant. And as part of that process, Redwood Community Services also has done boundary line adjustments, parcel development. There were several things that had to get that parcel ready for next steps of potential development. So since applying for that grant in 2018, actually the county, in partnership with RCS, was not awarded those state funds through CDBG. So there's no additional grant funding that was identified during that year. The contract with Redwood Community Services expired in 2018. So right now, the county is currently in process to remove Redwood Community Services from the deed and title holder of that land and bring it back fully into the county, being the sole deed and property owner of the vacant parcel lot in the front that was used with county dollars to purchase that vacant parcel for the purpose, again, of that grant funding for crisis residential services. So we are currently in the process with Redwood Community Services. They have completed boundary lines and easements and other aspects to clean up lines that make it clear that there's 2 vacant parcels on that land on Orchard Street that would come back under county ownership once we complete the next steps of proper noticing and finalizing our agreements, which we expect to happen over the next several weeks. And with that, I'm happy to answer your questions.
So in terms of the ongoing process that we're engaging, I know there's some discussion about using Measure B money for building of the crisis residential on the Orchard Street property. So I'm wondering if that doesn't happen, or it's not recommended, what will the county do with that property? Or are there other options that you're considering?
That's a great question. So yes, the county actually has purchased that line with Health and Human Services funding that's dedicated for use for Medi-Cal eligible services. So we think that that property is worth continuing to have in the property, to continue to have in the county's ownership for either the use of a crisis residential treatment facility, CSU, and other needs that Measure B might leverage, or for other purposes if for some reason that's not determined the most feasible spot.
Okay, thanks.
Ross?
And I wanted to make sure I understood. I didn't hear perfectly, but it's not transferred yet, but that's imminent.
It's not transferred yet, but we're in the process of all the pieces, all the steps that have to occur for that to be finalized, but it's not entirely finalized yet.
Mark?
She's helping me with my hearing. What?
How big is that
property, or the part, the two parcels, and is it big enough to house the CRT, CSU, and Puffer?
Well, my understanding is that's what the direction of the feasibility and next steps that the architect would be looking at. There hasn't been a full architectural or feasibility in the way that you'll hear discussed in your upcoming items. I think there's items specifically about this. But it's 39,000 square feet on those two parcels. It's a very substantial parcel size, so we certainly think it would, could be any number of services.
Any other questions? Is there any public comment on the presentation? Thank you very much. Next item, discussion and possible action regarding updating status of the architect RFQ and related feasibility study, which Mr. Gonzalez will give.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm here to speak on item 3B, which is the RFQ for architectural engineering and environmental services for their uses. Oh, my name is Nash Gonzalez, Executive Office. So what we're looking at is 3 uses: the County Psychiatric Health Facility, the Crisis Stabilization Unit, and the Crisis Residential Treatment Facility. So what the RFP would be requesting is professional services to complete the 3 facility components, including architectural, engineering, and environmental. And under environmental, we also have to throw in CEQA on this project, as well as a feasibility study and analysis for the 2 sites in the county that the analysis would determine to be the most feasible site and location and placement for the sites and the facilities in question. So 2 sites have been identified, 3 uses. The architect's going to be asked to evaluate and provide design and related services, including the appropriate environmental and CEQA documentation, site analysis for each of the 2 sites currently being identified, programming and planning, accessibility, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, life safety, leadership in energy, environmental design, which is LEED, security, telecommunications, structural, civil, geotechnical, medical equipment and furniture, interior design planning. So because this is a public project, CEQA also applies to both public and private projects. So this is one of the components that needs to be looked at. So the feasibility study will be the basis for the alternatives that need to be looked at under the CEQA document. And there's really no way of getting around the CEQA analysis. So the feasibility study, again, will serve as the basis for those. And so with that, be happy to answer any questions regarding the RFP.
Ed?
Yeah, this is beyond my area of expertise by a long shot. So it sounds like there are 2 sites that are being considered. Did I understand that right?
If I may, through the chair, what was originally identified in the PowerPoint presentation and discussions were the Howard Hospital and the Orchard Street.
Right.
So these are the 2 sites that would be looked at as far as feasibility.
Okay.
So just if I may also, I completely agree with you. This is way out of my area of expertise, but what Nash explained to me when we had our meeting was that CEQA requires that you not just jump in on one site, that you have to have alternative sites to consider for each project, and that's the issue.
Okay, so my question was, I know until you get bids, you don't know how much it's going to cost.
Right.
But is there like a ballpark what it costs to do this kind of thing on 2 different sites?
I really don't have an answer for you because it really comes down to what is provided to us in a bid from the architect. So that's why we're doing the RFP, RFQ. So number 1, we want to understand what the qualifications are based on having designed prior sites and so on, but then also telling us what it's going to cost, what the timelines are going to be, and what's going to be required under state law and federal law.
But is there an estimate of what the cost to get this assessment would be?
again, that's something that would be provided to us by the architect.
Okay.
The bidders would give us an idea of what it would cost.
And will they break it down by site? Presumably, there'd be a different cost estimate depending on the site?
I think we're confusing things here.
Okay,
There's a cost to the architect under the architectural services. What you're asking, I believe, is related to the two different sites under feasibility. Is that correct? Or both?
well, I was starting with
Got it.
what it's gonna cost to do the initial,
So we'll have some cost estimates. I would throw out for an example, with the jail RFQ under the architectural services, is that approximately, I'm just gonna throw, I think it was around 1 or 2 million.
Right.
And that's a $29 million project. So a portion of that, so that's, just to kind of keep it relative, that's what it's costing us under architectural design for that project.
okay,
Feasibility will return you with some
Alternatives and recommendations.
and cost estimates.
of what it would cost to actually build. Gotcha.
Correct, for each site.
Okay, and again, it's gonna be a fairly expensive choice, and it sounds like, if I understood right, the requirements are that we do both sites rather than decide on a site and then only do a architectural evaluation on the site that was selected.
So if I may, through the chair, the feasibility study identifies the pros and the cons for each of the sites. But what it does is it serves as the basis for your alternatives. So if we go down the path of, let's say, a more intense environmental review document like an EIR, CEQA requires that you have alternatives identified already going into it. So the feasibility study already lays the groundwork for doing that. Rather than to go out and try to find things, the feasibility study has already identified those.
If I might, just to clarify too, when you get the feasibility study, that's the first phase of the process that the architect's going to go through. You'll have that prior to then actually going through design. They'll have done some cost estimates, they'll have their generalized ideas and concepts, but they really move forward once we have identified your primary site. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Any other questions? Yes, please, Ross.
So does CEQA define exactly how that feasibility study has to happen? I mean, obviously, this committee has vetted the possibilities extensively, and frankly, it seems to me the answers are pretty obvious. So okay, if feasibility's got to be done, you know, what does that look like? What do we have to do? We have to go to a consultant. I mean, we've been doing our own feasibility studies. I mean, realistically.
If I may, through the chair, the feasibility study itself is not identified in CEQA. That's a totally separate issue. What the feasibility study is the architect using qualified experts to look at the feasibility of each of the sites in question. In other words, they're going to look at everything from whether or not site A is more feasible or whether site B is feasible, whether you take an existing facility and remodel it compared to a new facility that needs to be built. You also look at any environmental issues such as your type 1 and type 2 environmental studies that may be done. It looks at a lot of different things. It also would provide a cost-benefit analysis as well. So basically, it's done by a third-party independent that would be looking at the feasibility and then would provide the recommendations to the county as far as, here you go, here's 2 sites, these are the pros, these are the cons. And then a decision can be made based on the feasibility study.
If I might add to that, the cost benefit is probably the most important part. This group, and there's been no cost benefit to either one of these yet. Because you haven't done a traffic study, there's a lot that's done under CEQA or under an architectural feasibility review that no one, including anyone on the county staff, has conducted. So in order to do, the cost benefit is truly going to be your defining factor. And we have some idea of what one would be, but we have no idea what the other would be.
The issue, I mean, we're talking about like what it would cost. I mean, that's a big issue. The biggest problem is the cost in time. I mean, here we are a year and a half later, and we've got nothing. We've got nothing. And we're gonna go out to yet another consultant, and we're gonna pay more money, and then they're gonna find a way to pare it back, what we already kind of have indicated we wanna do. They're gonna parrot that back to us, and here we are again. We're gonna be 7 months down the road, and we're gonna be, another $100,000 for a feasibility study that comes to the conclusions we've already come to. I mean, this is brutal. This is absolutely brutal. And I'm really frustrated, like, good Lord, we cannot move this forward. We cannot seem to get this done. And it's great we have all this participation with the public. They're gonna hang us. And rightfully so. Well, not really. That is frustrating. Here we go again.
If you need a second, I'll second.
Process, no product. Sorry.
I think, at least I'm learning that this is the reality of spending public money. There's nothing, there's nothing here that can be bypassed.
Nash, thanks for being here. Do you believe that if we did approve a feasibility study, it could be completed in 60 days?
Again, that is something that we won't know until the architect comes back.
I understand, but you're a professional, you've done this more than anybody else that I know of. Do you think that's a reasonable?
I'd say 60 to 90 days is more realistic, because again, you have to throw into the mix that everybody's busy today. And it's really hard to just pull somebody off the shelf and say, can you do this, and turn it around. Because they have to look at the cost benefit analysis, they have to do the economics, they have to look at the sites themselves, they have to look at environmental issues. So let's just say, for example, you're looking at an existing building and you're trying to convert it and try to do a remodel. Are there asbestos issues there? If you're looking at an existing site that is vacant, are there any environmental issues that may be underground that nobody knows about, such as buried tanks or anything like that? So everybody has to look at all those different things, and all that takes time.
Well, Ms. Angela did state that there was a reason to have two of them. I believe it was Carmel said that, or one to fall back on the other. Is it possible to have a feasibility study on just one piece of property without a fallback?
Again, when you start going down the path of an environmental document, one of the questions comes up is, did you look at any alternative sites?
And you can say no.
And you say no,
Right.
And unfortunately, if you end up having to do an environmental impact report on something like this, then you're going to have to look at an alternative site. And rather than getting into all the details, but I'll just keep it really simple. CEQA says when you do an EIR, you have to look at a project, no project, and then alternative sites, and study all of those. So all the feasibility study does, it becomes a neutral analysis for the group to say, this is what the recommendations are. But if you go down, let's say the architect recommends that due to environmental issues, you have to do an EIR, they've already done the background analysis for the alternative sites.
To prepare an RFP, get the company to do the feasibility study, do you think that is something that we could have prepared for before this committee meets again in a month?
The RFP itself?
The RFP, sure.
The RFP has been prepared. It is with Sally Riley. She's looking at it for any legal and contractual issues, and at that time, it'll come back and we can be prepared to send that out. And I think Janelle can probably talk about the timelines when it comes to putting out an RFP. I think
It's in its final draft stages now.
Yeah.
So the RFQ has been, we've been
working on it.
Working on
Cranking
it since we were given board direction, and the board did direct that it be issued. So at the time that and you have a committee, a team that was put together that has been working with county staff on reviewing any of this and working with us and working through the process. Once that's reviewed, we're ready to issue. You issue it, you have 30 to 60 days to where you're done and you award a contract and then they begin their work.
So no action is required on our side to put out an RFP. This is just an informational update.
Correct.
Thank you.
Barb? Oh, Jen.
Thank you. I'm looking for a little bit of clarification, and I did miss March. I didn't see this in the minutes, but it seems like we're making some assumptions with this next step that I wasn't clear on. So we narrowed it down to 2 sites. And so does that mean no additional consideration is being given for the old public health building on Dora Street or any other locations? And then secondly, we're committing, it sounds like, with this process to co-locate all three facilities, a CSU, a CRT, and a pub unit. So were those things decided by the committee at the last meeting, not reflected in the minutes?
No,
If I can, through the chair, I can speak on the co-location aspect of things. That's another reason why you do a feasibility study, because the feasibility study will look at all three uses, and the architect will determine based on occupancy loads and whether separations need to be made, whether or not you can have all three uses on one site, 2 uses or 1 use. That's the reason why you do the feasibility study. And then I'm going to defer to now maybe on the old hospital site.
We were given direction to review the 2 sites, which was the Howard Hospital and Orchard Street. And I'll look to the CEO if she wants to add clarity. I believe that the Dora Street facility was determined to not be feasible. Tammy Moss-Chandler probably has a little bit more to provide on that, but I mean, when you go through a feasibility, you can do, like you said, this group kind of did your own feasibility, that seemed to be the least feasible. And to make this process less cumbersome, 2 sites would speed it up.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate that part of it. There were also proposals from the hospital about operating parts of this proposal too. So are all those being ruled out with this next step? Or are they still on the table?
This committee made recommendations to our board. Our board gave direction to staff. That hospital was not included in any recommendation that came from this committee.
there were specific reasons why.
If I may, through the chair before.
I have a question. So Nash, can you tell us what CEQA means? Because some of us don't know what that means. And the other thing, are we asking an RFQ for the construction and design of all of these facilities as well as a feasibility? Or are we asking for an RFQ for just a feasibility study for this?
So if I may through the chair, I'll take the easier ones first.
Okay.
As far as what the RFQ is asking for, it's asking for the feasibility study, and it's also asking for the design components, so design build. So the architect would do the analysis, but then also we would have designs that would be generated. It does not deal with the construction, because at that point you'd have to hire a construction manager and have somebody that would actually build the facility. This is just for design build.
Designing the construction
Yes.
of the projects, that was what I was trying to say, not the construction, the design of the construction.
This is just a design.
Okay.
This would be producing design drawings that would be used to go out to bid to be able to go and construct the facility.
You design, you bring in a construction project manager, you put out a bid package, you hire.
I'm familiar with that, I was
Yeah.
asking if
No, I'm just
what
saying,
we're
clarifying
asking
for
for.
everybody sitting here, just to help make that.
So then we'll come back to the most complicated one, which is CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. This is the law that was passed in 1970, which applies to all projects, whether they're private or public. And originally, when CEQA was conceived, it was looked at private projects. Later, there were several Supreme Court cases that made public projects very much in the forefront of having to do analysis. And so any project that is considered non-exempt, and I would say as an example of a non-exempt project would be a single-family home. Okay, but anything else would be subject to CEQA. You're going to build a building, you're going to build a hospital, you're going to build a jail, whatever you're going to do, you're going to go through CEQA. The jail process has been going through CEQA also. And what happens there is someone has to do an analysis to determine, are there any significant adverse environmental impacts based on the appendix inside the CEQA guidelines? There may be, and therefore you have to come up with mitigations, or maybe there aren't. And then you basically create a document that says there are no issues and you move forward. If it turns out during the initial study that there are significant environmental impacts, then A, can you mitigate them? If not, then you have to go to an EIR. And then the EIR is a process in itself.
Okay, thank you.
That's actually good timing, thanks. So to get back to Commissioner O'Reilly's question about Door Street. Again, my name is Tammy Moss Chandler. As the Director of Health and Human Services, I heard this committee talk about Door Street, and so I offered that willingly, but it's not a former public health facility. It is currently where virtually all of my inland-based public health and behavioral health and recovery staff work. It's a former hospital, but we work and have hundreds of employees who are employed and work in that building. But I actually thought it was worth looking at and brought it forward. I attended one committee meeting to talk about the use of that facility. And then I talked with my boss about the very real knowledge we have that that building already has significant repairs that are needed. So, as much as I might like Measure B to pay for those millions of dollars of repairs that are necessary, we've decided that it's actually incumbent upon the county to address those issues in that building and not put that forward to Measure B.
Plus,
So I want to make sure, actually, Nash, I want to make sure I understand, when you were talking about doing a feasibility study, that's driven obviously by CEQA and ERA, whatever it is. And that like a neg deck wouldn't work here. I mean, it just seems like that might work. You might be able to do a neg deck, or you think that wouldn't fly?
So there's a feasibility study, it has nothing to do with CEQA.
Okay.
Two separate things. A neg deck, we don't know until the architect does the initial study and determines, are there any issues or not?
Okay.
So we don't know at this point in time. And because CEQA requires that you subject these projects to environmental review, that's why you have to do an initial study, go through that checklist, whether or not there are any impacts, and then we'll know whether we can go down the path of a neg deck, an exemption, or something more strenuous.
Sorry, this could be part and parcel to the design of the building. This is like parallel path, or it is part of the same project, the same proposal, I guess. We're going to do a request for proposal potentially, and what I'm getting is that the feasibility study and the design of the building is a single project. Is that what you were saying?
No. The feasibility study is separate because based on the feasibility study, we'll determine what site you want to go to.
Okay.
And then begins what we call the scoping of the project. Before you even get into the design, basically what you do is you do a site analysis and a site design. That would be the basis for the CEQA document. What could happen is you could parallel the design with the CEQA document, but not the feasibility study. Because what you have is the CEQA document as it's.
Good Lord.
Let me go back, and this is a lot.
Is this confusing to just me or what?
This is a lot of information to take in, but the feasibility study runs a separate course. That again, as Sheriff Alden said, can it be done sooner rather than later? That's something that we have to talk to the architect about. But let's say we go 60 to 90 days out. That's the feasibility study. Okay, based on the feasibility study is you're going to pick your site, and then you begin your design. Once you begin your design, you then have a site that you've identified for CEQA purposes. And so you can run the CEQA analysis parallel to the design. But you're not going to come up with full design until the CEQA has completed.
Let me have one more try at this. I'm sort of getting the picture, but is our confidence level high enough? This is actually almost for the committee. Is our confidence level high enough that this would be the best, the feasibility would find that Orchard Street property to be the best alternative? Is our confidence high enough that we could do them parallel? And there'd be some risk, right? You know, if we did them both in parallel and we start doing the design at the same time we're doing the feasibility study, because usually they're serial, Could you do them in parallel? I mean, if it was my money, if it was my personal money, and I was confident enough, I'd do them in parallel because the time is so critical. So you could end up wasting that design. You could end up wasting that design money because you did them in parallel instead of doing them in serial. Does that make sense?
No.
Probably I don't know what I'm talking about, so I'm good with that. But you know, if you really want to move this thing forward, you could do both at the same time and take the risk.
You have to understand that there's very little CEQA necessary for Old Howard Hospital. You know, we haven't decided yes or no on anything, but Old Howard Hospital, I would imagine that there's very little CEQA that's going to be necessary on that, if that was a decision of the board, right?
You're going to have to do SQL on it,
Understood.
okay? And you're going to have to take a look at everything from the environmental inside the building to the environmental to the outside of the building, including traffic, noise, and everything that's associated with these types of uses.
Change in use also triggers.
It's a change in use, change of occupancy, all these things trigger CEQA. See, it's not just what was there before. Now you have to look at, that is the baseline, and then what is what you want to do today. It's a different use than what's there. It may look similar, but it's not.
Yeah.
So either side you go, you still have to do CEQA.
They'll come to the conclusion we want. They'll figure out what we want. They'll come to that conclusion. And
So your recommendation
we're
is
just
what?
going to spend 90 days and $100,000 figuring it out.
The recommendation, is basically we move forward with the RFP and wait and see what comes back as far as the answer to the feasibility study. Because that's what the feasibility study is going to tell us. Which site do we primarily look at? And then, once we've got that, we basically have our roadmap to move forward with doing the environmental and the design of the facility.
Yeah, and just, I think everybody is both concerned about moving things along and being sure that we move them along right and that we don't make, mistakes that will come back to haunt us later. So my question has to do with just the process from now. Once the requests go out, how long will it take to get the applicant's response? Is there a timeline set yet?
Once issued, it's typically 30 days, you get proposals, you do an evaluation, contract goes to the board for award. I mean, so anywhere between 30 to 60 days.
So you'll get various, presumably,
Hopefully.
applications. And then what's the process for selecting the applications or reviewing them to seeing what the cost is going to be to do it and who's then going to get the award? How does that work?
This is a qualification-based selection for architectural, not just cost. And when you look at various types of proposals, you can look at what's at the best interest of the entity. So the awarding entity doesn't always go to the lowest responsive bidder. I just throw that out there.
Yeah.
Not saying but once you do that, there's typically an evaluation panel that's selected. I don't have a panel put together yet. So typically you have some outside parties that are either, technically vested and interested. I usually sit on a lot of those evaluation panels, and there's criteria. So you evaluate the qualifications of the architect and then the proposal based upon the feasibility. So we're doing a dual selection process. Once that's done, an award recommendation comes forward. If there's any contractual negotiations that need to occur, let's just say we had questions or perhaps we wanted to, you can negotiate down. Maybe we want to pare down the cost a bit, and maybe we want to look at some alternatives to that number 1 or number 2 proposal. They come back, we make a recommendation to the purchasing agent in the county as to what our recommended award would be based on whoever that panel would make up is. Those recommendations go to the Board of Supervisors for a contract award.
So at what point does this committee be involved with this process?
What the board has directed is that not $1 of the Measure B money gets allocated unless the Measure B committee reviews and approves. So the additional site that we would not normally have in our RFP process is that this proposal and a budget would come back to the Measure B committee for approval of the budget before it would go to the board.
Budget for the
Well,
select?
there has to be, obviously, whoever wins the bid, is the successful proposer, they're going to have a cost to their work. So the county would not award that contract because it would be Measure B dollars. That would come here, and the Measure B committee would weigh in and either review or approve the allocation of Measure B dollars for that contract before it would go to the board. If we brought it to the board, remember, when we brought the Kemper contract to the board for $27,000, they would not approve it. It had to be approved by the Measure B committee.
Right.
So I can't imagine that the board would move forward approving this without the Measure B committee approving the allocation of the money.
Well, what I'm trying to get at is, since I know a number of people are concerned, Ross has voiced it, Sheriff has voiced it, about moving things along more quickly, I'm wondering if it would make sense to have some representation of this board who will be meeting with the people that are going through the process, so that we would know kind of where things are, because if this is the only point of contact once a month, it feels like a lot gets brought that's hard for any of us to evaluate quickly. So I'm wondering, the same way that this group recommended a member be appointed to the Kemper report to, liaise, so we knew kind of what was going on before it actually came to the board here for vote. I'm wondering if that might help things move along so that this board knew what was going on as the process was unfolding.
So the short answer to a long question is yes. And what we would do is, and we haven't gotten this far, Jed, because we've had multiple different projects that we've been working on. Just as the hiring for the project manager, that the Measure B committee will be involved by having Measure B committee members as part of the initial panel. When we do what's called the source selection committee, which is the committee that reviews the proposals, the intention is to have members of the Measure B committee on that committee.
Is that called the source selection committee? That's the name of, or something like that?
Yes,
Okay.
so yes to everything you're saying.
Good.
I mean, if you think about this, there is an ad hoc already, and that's a small committee that was working on the Kemper recommendations outside of this. I have at a minimum 4 members of this committee that will advise us on county process. And so we'll have Measure B committee members on the interview panel, and we would not move forward without having Measure B committee members on the committee that will select the architect. So, that's everything we've done. We've attempted to include committee members outside of this Wednesday meeting.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dan, did you have
Yeah, I just want to reiterate the comment I make every meeting is, I don't understand what the rush is that makes it so imperative that we can't do things in a logical way where we've thought out about everything, because we get one chance to do this right. We don't have the money to do right now, so what's the hurry? I mean, I know that the sheriff wants people out of the jail. I know that the doctors want people out of the ER. But, there has to be a plan to do this and not just throw them on the street and create something that's gonna be a total failure that, will make Mendocino County proud.
And besides, I guess we don't have a lot of choice. But to do it, we do it now. Yes, Ted, please.
Just a comment to Mr. Liberty's comment.
My rant.
Right. Just really get over it.
She gave me a Saturday earlier.
So there is a process, and it's very important when you are starting any kind of project, and project is now defined under the law as sometimes even wanting to do something, even, it's getting very broad in its description. So as the attorney for the county, this is a very important part that we go through these steps and that we not decide where we're going to end up and then, as you said, just get there. That's the very thing that you can't get through in a lawsuit. And the risk is on the county, it's not on this group. This group gets to look bad or whatever, but the risk is to the county. So it is an important piece that we have to go through, and we have to go through it legally.
Yes, Ross?
So, if we go forward with a design for building, a design for the building, I think we could take, we come up with a design that we propose or get a proposal from an architect to come up with a design for a building that works on an orchard. It works on any flat piece of ground that's got 2 or 3 acres, right? It wouldn't have to be exclusive to that property, so it would still have the ability if there's.
No.
What?
It's not that easy.
If I may, through the chair. In a perfect world, that would be great, Ross. I love that idea. In fact, I think a lot like you, but because every site and every building is different, you have to design for the site. You don't create a canned plan that you can just put on every site, because every site is gonna be different. You're gonna have drainage issues, you're gonna have solar issues, you're gonna have access issues, you're gonna have a number of different issues. Even traffic is something that a building has to be designed to. So, you might have some sites that need more trees for noise mitigation, others you don't. So it's not just taking a canned plan off the shelf and saying, this is what we're gonna do, and this is what we're going to have available to every site that we look at. You have to add design to each site. And any architect, any design professional will tell you that.
I'm not gonna win this in my
Carmel?
I just want to make a comment. When Mr. Gonzalez identified himself, he identified himself from the executive office, and that is true. His desk, his office is actually in my office. There's very good reason for that. Nash, for those of you that remember, when Nash was our planning director, he got the general plan and the eval through. And if anybody understands those documents, I want you to know how difficult that was. And so choosing Nash and asking Nash to work on this RFP was strategic in that he is absolutely a can-do person. Yes, he was our planning director. He got more done in that period of time than probably a lot of planning directors. So I share that because I want to assure this committee that it was Nash is the chosen one to actually move forward, and he's gotten this RFP done in a very short period of time. And so if anybody knows CEQA, if anybody knows planning and building, if anybody knows these rules and regulations and knows how to push a county forward, it is Nash Gonzalez. And I just want to say that to this committee to assure you that he wasn't just someone who was sitting in an office somewhere and he had a free 2 hours. This is a person who is truly an expert. He's not only worked in Mendocino County, he's worked in large metropolitan counties. He knows what he's doing. So Nash, thank you very much for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions?
I just want to make sure that we're not taking a vote today, but everything that Nash has talked about is still on track for moving forward. Nothing's going to slow down by us not taking a vote today, correct?
No, there's no vote needed. This was part of an update, and I just want to, I hate to kind of jump here out of turn. But again, if you look at what's been presented today, we are trying every way possible to make sure that the members of the Measure B committee know exactly what's happening. You know our time frame, you know what we're working on, you know what's happening, and that the Measure B committee is absolutely involved in everything. There's no vote. After this, I think there is just some work between Sally and Nash that needs to final. Janelle puts out, staff puts out the notices, and we get the RFP out. So there's nothing here today that was done or undone that will slow the process. And our hope is that we get through this without any issues, without any lawsuits, without any problems. And the only way to do that is to hire somebody who knows what they're doing. Thank you, Nash.
Please, public comment. Please stand to the podium and state your name.
I just wanted to ask this
State your name,
feasibility.
please.
Oh, sorry, my name is Neelam Solomon, and I'd like to find out about this feasibility study. You know, I'm totally a rookie here. So they decide site A is better than site B for whatever reasons, but it doesn't take into account the cost of the project, does it? Because that's also a feasibility item.
Yes, correct.
But how can they take a cost if you don't have designs for an empty lot and retrofitting and designs of,
Because they're design professionals. So they will take into consideration the potential cost to design each location, let's just call them locations.
okay,
Or the remodel of a facility or location.
versus
So
a building?
it's a cost benefit.
Okay,
That's the most critical part.
that's what I was wondering because I thought,
And that is a part of feasibility.
thank you.
You got it.
Mills, I think, they had a comment.
Sales Matt, position from Willits. I'm concerned that the proposed feasibility study will not look into a crisis unit in Fort Bragg, which I think is desperately needed. This will exclude that from occurring.
John?
I'm glad to hear, John Wetzler, glad to hear that. I stand for that. Something I've been concerned about, and that we can do parallel, something that we talked about, Carmel, was are not people costs that provide us with health services going to be our largest future costs? I think that the building the facilities are going to pale to what the future costs and the providers and the people costs are going to be. What will the service provider costs be for a full build out? And I think, is anybody working on that? And we may find out that, we may find out that that will tell us how much we can build. And that concerns me. And possibly, I've been talking to people on the coast, maybe what we should do is build just one unit and see if we can fill that unit with people and see what those, the costs are gonna be for providing services. These are gonna be consequential costs affecting what we can afford to build in the future. The people costs, I think, are gonna be important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Point of clarification, Carol Hester, 75%, 25% is what the Measure B states. The 25% is for the ongoing programs, the 75% for the first 5 years, am I right, Tom? Is for building, construction. So while y'all are monkeying around with personnel, programs, staffing, and all of that, you can't do it until you have something in place in which these things can take place. And again, Measure B says 75% of the funds for a building, or buildings, 25% for staffing.
And Ross Chandler, I'd just like to offer public comment on this topic that I hope that Measure B and the process for this RFQ will continue to recognize the unique needs of the coast in terms of both facilities and services, knowing that the two sites that are currently identified are in Willits and Kyle.
Moving on to the item 3E, discussion and possible action regarding informational presentation on the Brown Act. We would like our county council, Kit Elliott, to make a presentation.
Sorry, I thought I missed one topic there. So I will just say when it was originally thought that we would bring over Sven Hagen from the board to assist and myself to assist this committee, we had a discussion with you originally about just having a sort of refresher training or discussion. It should be that everyone at this in this committee has in fact done their 2 hours of ethics training. But and I see, I got called in to sort of do this at the last minute. I think they realized they had some time, so it snuck me in. But they added the Attorney General's sort of overview here at the back of your agenda. And so I'm looking at Roman numeral 7. So there's 2 pieces I think I want to discuss most with this group, and that is just to rehash again this whole concept of what's on the agenda, what can be discussed, how you discuss those things. And then the other thing is with regard to how to communicate with each other and what's a serial meeting, what's, you know, what your mandates are. So with regard to the agenda issue, which keeps coming up in this meeting, again, the agenda is very specific and it's there for a reason. You try and give your public, you know, what are the items that you're going to be discussing, what you might or might not take action on, what those possible actions could be, so that when they're at home deciding whether they want to attend this meeting, they have enough information to go forward and, you know, and to attend. So the reason you don't want to, and you don't have a right to take action or put something else on the agenda after it's posted is because it might be something that's of great interest to a public member that then doesn't come to the meeting because they don't know that it's going to be discussed, and they miss out on something that's very important to them, and therefore you have violated your mandate to be a public committee, give notice to the public, and include them. So the way that reads out also is that so no action or discussion shall be undertaken on any item not appearing on the posted agenda, except that members of the legislative body or its staff may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed by persons exercising their right to public comment. And so, and in addition, on their own initiative or response to questions posed by the public, a member of the legislative body or its staff may ask a question for clarification. That's the other piece I hear is, do we get to, you know, have any kind of engagement? And the answer is minor, but you can't take action on that. The action that you could take is to say, wow, that's a very interesting topic. I would like to see that on our next agenda for discussion. That would be the action that you would take. So that's a very important piece. And then the other piece, and John Wetzler's here, he was the chair of at that time, I think it was the Behavioral Advisory Board, I think that was the Mental Health Board at that point. But that's this concept of a meeting, and a meeting takes place when a quorum, you know, of these members of this committee are in any place at one time. So that doesn't mean physically. So one of the things that I talk about a lot is serial communication, and that is with modern texting, with email. That is something that often is a problem. So sometimes, for example, I would send out, okay, I'm going to be doing a Brown Act training, and I would send it out to all the members, and they'd be like starting to ask questions back in a reply all manner, and I would say, you have to stop, because this is, you all now are communicating something in your subject matter, and you're doing it, you're basically having a meeting outside of the public. And again, the public has the right to have that information. So again, a majority of the members of the legislative body, which this is, and if there's any questions why it's a legislative body, one, it's created by a vote, even more important, but these members are appointed by the Board of Supervisors. Any member, any commission created or appointed by the Board of Supervisors is mandated to comply with the Brown Act. So the majority of members of a legislative body shall not, outside a meeting authorized under this chapter, use a series of communications of any kind directly or through intermediaries to discuss, not even do anything, just to discuss, to deliberate or to take action on any item of business that's within the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body. So it's regularly, Carla can attest to this, especially new board members, hey, I would like all my other board members to have this. Can I send out this thing I wrote up, right? And she's like, no, that can't happen. You can bring it to a meeting and do it post it publicly, and they will see it when it goes on the agenda along with every other public member. They don't get to communicate that way through the clerk, through a public member. That's one thing they can't do. So, and again, that's something, it says that person does, hang on 1 second. Okay, sorry. So, that's often misunderstood. It's, I've heard some discussions from people saying, for example, maybe we should divide Measure B up, and that would be, then we'd have 2 committees that could go forward, or we could divide them into 3 committees and go forward. If you did that, Carla would have to staff each one and every one of those, which we couldn't do. They would still have to be, dividing in 2, you have 1 as a quorum, right? And so you would have, each one would have to be this sort of large public meeting. How you can move forward or do things, and is what this committee has been doing, is in appointing ad hocs, and that's something that the chair can do basically at any time. So that is the way to move a body like this forward. And I'll open up if there's any questions. So.
Yeah.
So I have a question, because I got this letter from Sheriff Allman, and I understand it was sent out to all board members and also released to newspapers. And so I, wanted to respond, but I was reticent because I was afraid that it would, violate the Brown Act with this annual meeting thing. And Kim, was that correct in my assessment, or should I have responded to?
So I don't know that, so you said you got a letter from, so I'm looking at, I was quickly looking at this whole thing, so that's when I saw the AGs on here, and I see there's a letter from Sheriff Allman, and I did read it in the newspaper. So I didn't hear, was that, you received that?
It was sent to all board members.
Okay. So that is, so you were right, you should not have responded, and you certainly wouldn't want to reply all. But that is, again, that's a communication, even though I know it was in the newspaper and so it was public, and I don't know what the order of those things were, that still would be seen as a communication under the Brown Act. So I would avoid that in the future.
So then I could send a letter in response to the whole board and not expect a reply? I mean, this was kind of a provocative letter.
So you can't send a response to the whole board.
But I could send a letter with my opinion to the whole board? I mean, I found this.
No, I'm saying no, you can't do that.
So then this letter is acceptable to publish one's opinion and provoke controversy? So
I read the letter in the newspaper. I don't know, I have not read the letter that's attached here. I don't know if they're the same. So the answer is, you can't, again, communicate with all board members. You can't send something to Carla to send out to all board members, and you certainly can't send to more than a quorum, okay, to a quorum of the members. And the problem with emails, if you send them to, say your 11-member team, if you send them to 4 other people, so there's only 5 of you, the chances that will then get sent to the 6th member and violate your Brown Act, that's called serial communication. That's exactly, that's, Ross, that's forbidden.
I didn't do it, so.
So, I mean, that's what normally happens. That's the problem with email, is you might have restricted it to 5, but then if one of them sends it to one more person, or the other, they think, well, the rest of them should have it. That's a serial conversation that you've violated your mandate to the public, because you're having a communication that is not in front of the public. And again, it's not always understood by the public that that's your mandate, but that is.
So are there consequences? Are there consequences?
So the Brown Act, you can't, it can be a violation. I mean, it's not often, it can be a violation of the law. It's not often taken up there. I mean, in my career, I happen to have been in the appellate court one time watching a council member defend himself for a violation of the Brown Act against the Attorney General's office. It's rare. So, you know, it's one of those things, it happens, I mean, you know, the Mental Health Advisory Board, you know, it happened many times. But it's the correction and doing it now, this letter that's discussed has now been brought and added to the agenda. So it is in the public eye, and of course now that you've discussed it, it's definitely in the public eye. But it's those things that you want to avoid, so.
Mark? So I received a letter from John Wetzler, and I forwarded it to Carla, who forwarded it to everyone. Is that a Brown Act violation? I made no communication, I forwarded what I received.
The topic wasn't the same topic.
Right. So, and that's why you're asking me, and I haven't seen it, so it's hard for me to answer. But so again, you have a certain subject matter jurisdiction, and so that's the area that you can't discuss. I mean, for example, if you sent to Carla pictures of your daughter's wedding and you said, I would like this to go out to, and I don't know if you have a daughter, but you know, I'd like this to go out to the board, you're not violating the Brown Act because that's not your subject matter jurisdiction. It's when you're discussing in any kind of letter something that is the purview of this committee, then that would be a violation.
What was distributed was a comment from the public, so it was treated as public comment, public correspondence. It was not a letter from Mr. Myrtle as a member of the committee.
I did not draft the letter, I forwarded a letter that I received.
So that would be okay. Again, it's not you communicating with, and so that's a great example. So just so you know, John can go and talk to each one of these committee members, and he can tell, and each one of you can meet with John. And John could go down the row and say, well, I've now talked to these, 4 members, and they, this is what they say. But as soon as John starts talking to the 6th member and saying the 5 before this, think this way, he's assisting in that serial communication, and he doesn't violate the Brown Act because he's not under the Brown Act as this committee member. But the committee member would have to say, wait, I can't hear what 5 other members have said because now as the 6th person, I would be in violation of the Brown Act. And as I always say, I can't violate the Brown Act because I'm not a Brown Act body. I'm an advisor to the Brown Act, but I can certainly assist and would certainly avoid assisting anybody violating. So.
Thank you for the definition of provocative, Member Gordy, because I don't believe there was anything provocative in the letter that was thanking everyone on this panel for contributing to the betterment of victims of mental health, which the voters have asked us to do. And the letter was written after I contacted outside counsel and advised them that the letter was going to be sent to all registered newspapers in the county of Mendocino, because I think we can all agree the definition, the reason that the Brown Act was put into place is for public transparency. And I can think of very few things which would be less transparent than sending a letter to every registered newspaper in the county of Mendocino, as well as an open letter here, and hoping it was going to be on our agenda. So your definition of provocative and mine apparently are 2 entirely different things, but I would welcome a discourse on a letter that was written challenging everyone to do what the voters want us to do, and that's to empty the emergency rooms and to get law enforcement back on the street and to provide better service to the victims of public health. I'll give you an example. Last Friday, Ms. McGordy, as a citizen of this county, were apparently in belief that there were law enforcement officers in the Ukiah Valley. 5 law enforcement officers were all inside the Ukiah Valley Medical Center because there were 4 mental health victims that had come in an hour-and-a-half period. So there was literally no law enforcement officers on the street whatsoever other than highway patrol. So this letter was not meant to be provocative, although it was meant to create emotions, because when emotions are created, certainly people want to have some kind of solution to that. And so I will challenge you and the other members on this committee to continue, and this has been a very progressive meeting today. We've actually talked about pushing things along and getting a quality product for what we're trying to do. So thank you for bringing it up, Ms. McGordy.
Well, actually, I'll answer whether you should respond or not. I mean, again, this is a Brown Act discussion. This is, the letter that's now been brought to my attention is not the subject of this discussion. The subject of this discussion is our communication. And so if you have questions about the Brown Act, that's the topic on the agenda right now. So any further questions or anything, any other issue that this board has in terms of, whether they understand anything? And also, if you have a question, any one of these committee members is absolutely welcome to call me at any time. I try to assist whenever I can. So, thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Sir, I would welcome anybody in this committee to put this letter on next month's agenda if we want to talk about it in public
Oh,
forum.
it's already on our agenda.
There we are. Okay. Thank you.
Is there any public comment?
About the Brown Act?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, I'll wait.
No,
Sorry. Joe Bradley, regarding the Brown Act, I sat on a county committee for 18 years. And it went from being non-Brown acted to being Brown acted. And I think I've gone through 4 to 6 trainings on it. Every time I had a training, I learned something new. And I've heard people in this room and other people joke about the Brown Act, but the transparency that is needed for the public, if somebody, and we all know our county, nobody in this county has their own opinion. And they're gonna come forward if they don't think they heard something, and it just takes one person to stir the pot and to blow something up. And the Brown Act is here to protect us from that. And I think it's a real necessity in this oversight committee. And I would suggest that you do take Kat up on asking questions if you don't get it. I keep a copy of the Brown Act in my stuff. And I've been trained with the Brown Act Bible, and I've been trained with papers that are short. But there is a lot to learn, and it can get confusing, but don't let it stop you.
thank you. Yeah, I'm open.
I just wanted some clarification. I have no opinion on this, but the sheriff is asking about this letter being as an agenda item. I believe Ms. McGordy has said the letter is on the agenda. As a matter of protocol, the clerk put it as correspondence received. So it's not as an agenda item. Right, correspondence received. So all I'm saying is, Sheriff, if you wanted it as an agenda item, you're certainly welcome to put it on.
Well, listen, I'm okay with it because it's certainly accomplished my goal of getting people to read it and reread it many times. And if they want to challenge me on the content, I
Well,
will.
as a person who, is responsible for a lot of process that happens, I just want to be sure that when Carla and the chair go to put the agenda together for the next meeting, that the letter is not an agenda item.
I'm not putting it on, but if somebody wants to, I would.
Okay, all right, that's all. I just wanted clarification. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Wood.
In that case, I would like to respond to the letter which I called provocative.
So I think what we just said, and I don't know that was understood, it is not, so we have our agenda items, we just got to the final agenda item, which was my training.
Right.
And my training says we don't talk about something that's not on the agenda. Now, just like what was heard that John's public comment was received, because this was out in the public and because people received it, apparently committee members, my understanding from our CEO is that it was put in the packet as public comments. But again, you don't, when public comments here, it doesn't become its own separate agenda item. So I'm trying to be clear about that.
I understand.
It seems like that was not understood by me.
Well, he, defended it, so I was.
Just as a matter of process, if the committee receives correspondence, it's on the agenda, not only for the committee members to understand that, but also that the members of the public are aware that there was a piece of correspondence, and they can certainly request a copy of it from the clerk. So it's for complete transparency that the public can also request, is aware.
So Kit, what you're saying is that as far as any discussion, whether it's 2 members or the full board, that it needs to be agendized. That just having it listed as correspondence received is not enough to have the discussion.
Right.
That's what you're saying, yeah.
So then we could assume that this won't happen again, we're following the Brown Act collective bargaining?
So I've worked with a lot of boards. So the answer is I would not assume anything.
Good answer, good answer.
I think that when I walked in here, I was fumbling around.
Would you please stand up at the podium?
Don Westler. When I walked in, I had these photographs that I had taken of the Nevada County Crisis Stabilization Unit, and I handed you those. And I realized then, at that point, because of my training, that was a big mistake.
No, they're to the clerk, always to the clerk.
Right, but I should have brought in all the
No, I
copies.
made copies for everybody.
I know you did, and I wanted to publicly thank you for that. But I thought that actually, to do it right, I should have brought in copies for the public and the board.
So the public isn't so much required to do that. What it is, because the public doesn't normally do that. But, and most small committees don't have the luxury of having a staff member come in here, go take it, copy it, So the object is if you give it to the clerk, and she's going to be providing it ultimately to the members, that there would also be available, at a relatively soon after time for any public members that wanted a copy of that. So that would give them.
Thank you, Carla.
You're welcome.
All right,
I think we're ready to, committee members and then adjourn.
okay, committee member reports, shall we start with Jean?
I have nothing. I just want to draw your attention to the stepping up forums that happened recently.
I didn't hear Jen, say it again.
The stepping up forums that happened recently that were just excellent, and I'm sorry that everybody on this committee, with the exception of Dr. Barish, couldn't attend.
I just want to say that this has been a good meeting, and I really appreciate everybody's input, and certainly it's interesting that the public continues to attend these meetings, which speaks to the interest from the public, so thank you.
But I saw it. It's our money.
Mercifully, I have nothing to add.
But you don't come on Tuesdays. We're there every Tuesday with lots of items. Show up.
Mercifully.
I attended the Stepping Up Forum, and I learned a lot.
Can I say something really quickly?
Yes.
Just a reminder, if you have something you'd like to be placed on the agenda, please email me and let me know. I'll send a request out, but please send those requests to me. Thank you.
I have nothing to report.
I met with Bernie Darvell, a city council person. They want interest in what's happening with Measure B. There's lots of interest for the coast action. We'll be meeting with a board with them. So any of you off the coast that be interested in attending that, please contact me. I can be reached at Fort Bragg Electric. And I will invite you to that meeting. Most importantly, I think everyone wants to have services at their locations. But if you read the Kemper report, we can't afford these emergency services at every location. It's going to be a negative, it's a cost to this committee. We have $2 million to spend annually. So we need to remember that we need to build something that we can serve. And as I will remind everyone, we built a $22 million gift of CV Star, and we had to pass a measure to keep the pool heated and the lights on. So I don't want that same thing to happen here, and we'll take a lot of public criticism for that not to happen.
Nothing to report.
I have nothing more to report.
Yeah, just two things. I do hear people from other parts of the county to the committee, and I'm cognizant that we want as much service as we can for the whole county, not just the areas we represent. The other thing I'd say is I notice that some of us have louder voices than others. I'm often told to be quiet, but I notice in the audience, it isn't always possible to hear everybody, and because we're talking about wanting the community to be involved, I hope we can work out either some microphones sometime or that we really make it our business to be sure the people in the corners can hear us. Thank you. Thank you.
Before we adjourn, one other issue, we've taken 2 months since the last meeting. The question is when the next meeting will happen, and I would be interested to know what there will be. I mean, certainly we have the ad hoc committee and the recommendation of the ad hoc committee, though that could certainly wait 2 months to discuss. I wonder if there are any other items of discussion that require we meet in a month, if there's going to be any issues to deal with at that time, and whether there would be any discussion of it. Yes?
I'm sorry, Jill Bradley. The RFP, we were just talking about it earlier, if they're gonna be ready to present it to you, should we have a meeting?
Well, now we'll have, that's the next thing I was going to ask is whether the outstanding issues will be.
If you would like me to comment, I would
Yes.
say that the project manager interviews will happen over the next month. And then, of course, the RFP will be let, and then there'll be a period of 30 days before we get anything back. So if we met in June, it would be probably for the ad hoc report. But I think that as far as the project manager, we will know in July who that person is. And then we will have a pretty good update and be here in front of the committee. We should be, I really think, we're here in July. So really that's what I would say as far as the follow-up items, that I don't see those follow-up items being ready in June.
So that being said, I think it would make sense to put off the next meeting until July unless anybody has objection. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I do have an objection. As much as I don't want to go to any meetings that are not productive, I think it's valuable, one, to meet regularly, interact with the public regularly, and to get reports, even if we don't have, the end report. I think there's enough important matters before this board to get input from people that are working on various things, that we not skip a meeting and have 2 months where we're not together.
Any other comment on the board? That being said, maybe we should take a vote and see how people feel. All of those that would be in favor of meeting again in a month? All of those in favor of meeting in 2 months?
I abstain.
Well, because I see it both ways. I would like to meet next month, but I really wouldn't if there's nothing. So I'm good either way personally.
Yes, Barish, one thing that if we meet next month, that's fine. If we meet in 2 months, what we can commit to this committee is that we can have a very brief written report on those items that we're working on, so the committee knows where we are.
By
That's
email?
one option. Yeah, and it would be public record, because this committee's a Brown Act committee, so that's something that we could do. And I can attend in June or July, it doesn't matter to me.
Well, on the basis of the vote, the next meeting's in July. And that includes Thank you very much.
It's just on vacation.